Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. I'm Dave Valente. Thank you to those folks on TikTok. Sorry about that. Who are watching. I'm not able to see your questions or anything on TikTok. Apologize, but please watch. Please tap the screen and give us some likes and some love and expand the reach of the audience. A lot to go over tonight. We're going to talk about the All Star game, what happened during the All Star game, and we'll also be previewing the trade deadline for the Central Division. We actually already had breaking news today. In fact, let's get into a little bit of that. Yeah, so this afternoon, as I was preparing for the show, we got huge news out of the NHL. One of the big trade chips of this trade cycle, Vladimir Tarasenko, has been moved. He went to the St. Louis, or went from the St. Louis Blues to the New York Rangers. So they get a little bit deeper in their scoring. Now, the long knock on Tarasenko is he's had many injury issues, and will he be able to stay healthy for the blue shirts as they head down towards the end of the season? But in exchange for Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Mikola, the young defenseman, the Blues are receiving Sammy Blais, who used to be a Blue, as well as a prospect, Hunter Skinner, and two conditional picks. Now, the conditional picks, the first one is a first round pick, which St. Louis needs. It's the later of New York's two. They have two for this season, their own and Dallas's pick. So, will they? Uh, it depends on who finishes with a better record, who gets which pick gets moved to St. Louis. The second pick is also conditional. It's a right now it is a fourth round pick in this draft, but it'll move up to a third round pick if the Rangers make the playoffs. Which, if they stay healthy, and again, I picked the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup this season because they had a really great end of the year last year, and they had only added to the team. But yeah, so uh, rich get richer as far as the Rangers go. They get another top flight scoring talent, a Russian player to play alongside a guy like an Artemi Panarin, or maybe give secondary line a little bit more scoring punch. Maybe snap Capo Caco and Alexi Lafreniere out of their early careers that really haven't panned out as much as the Rangers hoped. Um, but yeah, that's been the big news today is that movement in the Central Division of Tarasenko out, bringing in some young players, Sammy Blais, who the franchise is familiar with, and young defensive prospect, and then two picks for the Blues. I believe there's going to be still be some more movement with the Blues, but we'll get into that when we do our preview. Right now, half the league is on its 5-day mandated break post All Star. So there are two 5-day breaks. One is a pre All Star break, where half the league is off for the 5 days preceding the All Star break. Then the other half of the league is off for the post All Star break, so 5 days. My Buffalo Sabres are on that break right now. I think today was their first practice they were able to have. So they're hitting the ice. They returned to the ice on Saturday, but we're seeing the teams that were off before the All Star break getting back onto the ice and playing some games. And speaking of games tonight, let's take a look at the schedule here for tonight. February night games. All these times are Eastern. Calgary is going to be in Detroit to take on the Red Wings. Detroit, very slim chances on playoffs, so they need to go on a run at this point. Calgary, same thing. I mean, they've struggled, and they need some of their big guns to really start hitting. But it's really interesting to see the struggles of both Calgary and Florida, who pulled off that massive trade in the offseason to bring in a new talent, really lose talent, really good talent, but bring in new talent, and it's not really worked out for either team so far this season. Speaking of the Florida Panthers, they're hosting San Jose at 7 p.m. Uh, Again, this is a big game for Florida. Then, if they win this game, they can hop ahead of Buffalo, who is, again is idle until Saturday. Although Florida's played a few more games than Buffalo, but it psychologically it'll put them ahead in fourth place. There's still work to do. Whoever the Atlantic Division team is, because they've got to hop over, the likes of the Islanders and the Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals to really get in the playoffs to secure a spot, because there's no guarantee that the fourth place team in the Atlantic Division will qualify for the playoffs. Seattle's in New Jersey. This is going to be a battle of two young up and coming clubs. Um, that game is at 7 p.m. We had some news, and we'll talk about that when we get to the injury news for the Devils. The Edmonton Oilers will be in Philadelphia at 7 p.m. tonight to take on the Flyers. Um, uh, this should be a win for Edmonton. Philadelphia has had some moments this season, but again, I think there's just too many injuries, too much flux with the Flyers to really count them in any of the races right now. I think as we get closer to the trade deadline, you'll start to see some pieces move. Colorado is in Tampa Bay for a rematch of the Stanley Cup Finals. That game is at 7 p.m. That should be a really good game. Colorado is starting to hit on all cylinders, even despite a lot of the injuries they've had. They're starting to move up the conference race in the Central Division. In fact, I think they're in a solid playoff position right now. I think they're in third. Vancouver is on the island to take on the Islanders. The Islanders are hot, having acquired Bo Horvat, and we'll get into some news for him in a minute. But Islanders have won a few in a row. They've tied Pittsburgh on points for that final playoff position. I think they've played a couple more games, so Pittsburgh still holds it. But as long as the Islanders remain hot, this is their chance to really solidify their playoff chances. That game is at 7:30, and then the final game of the night, which is a pretty early final game of the night, which is at 8 o'clock. Vegas Golden Knights will be in Minnesota to take on the Wild. Vegas won their first game out of the playoffs. It's a very tight race in the Pacific Division, and they're back on top, but um, it's precarious. I mean, there's not a whole lot of room between first place and completely out of the playoffs when it comes to the Pacific Division. So that's tonight's schedule. Let's take a gander at what happened with the All Star game. So All Star game was this weekend in Florida. The Atlantic defeated the Metropolitan Division in the first game, and the Central Division defeated the Pacific Division. Well, technically in the first game, it was Central defeating the Pacific. Then the Atlantic defeated the Metro, and then the Atlantic defeated the Central Division in the final to win the All Star game. The team splits $1 million. It's less than $100,000 per player. Although I'm sure nobody would sneeze at winning that kind of prize. Um, and it was surprising to see Atlantic make it through, because that Metro All Star game was pretty pretty interesting. I mean, they had Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin on the same line, and they were just passing the puck back and forth. It was it'd be amazing to see what those guys could do on the same team in this for a full year. But yeah, Sidney Crosby had a couple sick goals. It was a really entertaining game. Um, the final was pretty entertaining. The Atlantic got out to a big lead. The Central pushed back a little bit in the second period, but the Atlantic held on. Rasmus Dahlin from the Sabres did get some assists and scored a goal at the end. It was a pretty weak goal, but at that point, I think the game had pretty much been decided. So, um, but yeah, I enjoyed the All Star game. It was pretty entertaining. Um, I think in the future, to improve it, um, is to have more defensemen involved. Um, it was really most of the teams had like one defenseman on the entire team. I think the Atlantic was, Darlene was the only defenseman. The Central did have three defensemen. They, of course, made it to the final, but didn't win. Um, but the other divisions did only had one defenseman. I think there's some all-star defensemen out there, and they shouldn't get short shrift because it really is an offensively focused game. The other complaint that I had, of course, was with the Seattle situation where Matty Beniers was injured. He was their picked representative by the NHL, and they replaced him with the Vegas Golden Knight, and Vegas already had a couple players on the team. They should have, if you're going to make the requirement that the first round of picks will be from each team, then you should replace from that team, um, and not leaving a team without representation during the All Star game. So the All Star game gave us the 3 stars of the week. So they were all picked from the All Star game. Matthew Kachuk of Florida, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. Dylan Larkin from Detroit, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points. And Mitch Marner actually set an All Star record with 6 assists in the game. So all those points were in the All Star game. They didn't count any of the games played. Um, uh, Late last week and when figuring that out. So that is what our 3 stars of the week look like. It's been a very interesting week. So let's talk about some other news. Um, in an article in the Athletic, the daughter of Buffalo Sabres owner Terry and Kim Pagula revealed that her mother who has been the kind of the managing partner of the Buffalo Sabres, um, president of the Buffalo Sabres, suffered a heart attack in June and has been in recovery ever since. And she's suffered from neurological symptoms where she's fine. She thinks well. Um, she can do normal functions. It's that her words don't come. I think they call it aphasia. So she's been suffering from that for the last year. Um, but can hopefully continue good health for Kim Pagula. I've been critical of the Pagulas over the years, especially coming in saying that the sole reason of the Sabres is to win the Stanley Cup, and then the team just completely collapsing for the last 11 years. So, but I think they've turned it around. They've started trusting hockey people to make hockey decisions, and they kind of let what they've done with the Bills guide what they've done. So, um, but I'm glad that she's on the road to recovery and hope for continued recovery and that she gets back to normal as far as speech and all that stuff goes. Um, Also with the Buffalo Sabres, Dylan Cousins signed a 7-year contract. So, that young core of the Buffalo Sabres is really starting to take shape and be locked in long term. You've got Darlene, you've got Dylan Cousins locked in for 7 years, Matthias Samuelson locked in for 7 years. Jeff Skinner, of course, has been locked in for a while. Um, it's they're using that cap space that they have to make sure that those young top gun prospects are in the fold for a long time and taken care of, and that sends a message to players out in the league that if you come to Buffalo and perform well, you're going to get taken care of. So, um, it's just kind of changing hearts and minds when it comes to the league. Another big contract we have alluded to it a moment ago was Bo Horvat signed an 8-year contract with the New York Islanders after being acquired. It's uh, a $8.5 million per year for Horvat. He gets a no movement or no trade clause for the first 4 seasons, and then he gets a modified no trade clause for the last 4 of that deal, and then that no modified is that he submits a list of 16 teams that he can't be traded to. So half the league he gets to cut out from being traded to. Dylan Cousins also gets a modified no trade clause for the last 3 seasons of his contract, and that's just a modified a 5-team no trade list. So much more options for Buffalo once you get to that. It's completely open the first 4 years. The last 3 years is just a 5-team list that you can submit. Um, I forgot to talk about a couple things with the All Star game. Matthew Tkachuk won the MVP award. We talked about him being the star of the week, first star of the week. He uh, did he got 7 points in the both All Star games or both games that they played, and really kind of drove the team to victory. Although I would say that Dylan Larkin probably did more in the final. than Kachuk, but Kachuk had a great game, and you knew they were going to give it to the hometown kid, even if it was close. If it was close, so congrats to Matt Kachuk. He gets a Honda Pilot, I believe, for his troubles. Um, I will say that I watched the skills competition on Friday, and it was to me it was hit and miss. Like I really like the traditional, hitting the targets, the fastest skater. I did not like the breakaway challenge, the kind of half skits, half breakaway. I mean, I like that they brought Roberto Alongo out. You didn't want a situation like Rick DiPietro at the '07 All-Star game, but it was there was too much shtick to it. Like, uh, I don't think they even cared if they scored or not. It's cool seeing Sergey Ovechkin scoring on Luongo. I mean, but to me, that was just fluff. It wasn't really like anything kind of cool or innovative done to do that. I did like the new goalie competition, the one where the goalie was behind the net on his side, would try and shoot the puck in the net. It was a small hole to get it in, and uh, it was an interesting contest. So if the goalie scored on the net, hitting the small hole, it was a 3-on-0 in on the other goaltender to score. The goaltender stopped the puck. They got 3 points. If they scored, the 3 points would go to well, the shooting team. Um, if they hit the board that surrounded the hole, it was 2-on-1, and if they completely missed, it was a one-on-one, and I did like the idea that they put some of the female all-star players in there. Sarah Nurse scored an absolutely insane goal doing the old Peter Forsberg move, um, but yeah, that was a good one. Of course, I love the harder shot. Um The golf game was good, but I just think that's at some point, they might need to either rethink the breakaway challenge or, just nix it because it was just too hokey. But anyway, that was with the All-Star game. So next Saturday is the outdoor game for the Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals at Carter Finley Stadium in Raleigh. That is the home of the North Carolina State Wolfpack football team. Um, the cool thing about that is if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan, you're not going anywhere as far, like a new stadium to park at. The PNC Arena in Raleigh shares the parking lot with Carter Finley Stadium. It's a massive parking lot. There's going to be lots of tailgating. If you're in the area, you should go see that game, or at least go down there for the tailgate, hang out, and get some good food. Because I hear that they do it up right down there in Raleigh, and I'm glad that the Carolina Hurricanes are getting involved in these outdoor games. I've been on record saying that I'd love to see more Southern outdoor games. Put it in Tampa, put it in Florida. It's much harder to do those there. Or put them. We had that Vegas game back in the '90s that was outside of Caesar's Palace. Um, it can be done, but I'd like to see more teams than what we've seen over the last few years, where you see a lot of Boston, you see a lot of Pittsburgh, see a lot of Washington, which we're seeing in this game. Um, but getting new teams involved in these outdoor games is cool. I like getting those fan bases involved. Let's see. That's it for the news. Let's talk about some trades. Besides the massive blockbuster trade for Vladimir Tarasenko this afternoon. Um, not, you know, not completely massive. This one is Seattle acquiring defenseman Jason Megna from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a fourth round pick in this year's draft. It's just depth defenseman acquisition, and really, if you're going to get into the playoffs, it is defense is going to be the one thing that you're really going to need to make sure you have plenty of depth for. It's hard to go through an entire playoff with the same six defensemen, blocking shots, heavy forechecks, things like that. Defensemen get injured. I remember Buffalo's probably their best chance at getting to and winning the Stanley Cup final was in 2005 when 2006 when all of their defensive core except for Brian Campbell were out for Game 7 against the Carolina Hurricanes, and they only lost because, Brian Campbell was off the ice for a delay of game call. Um, so you need to have depth defense to make those deep runs in the playoffs. So Seattle getting depth of defense in this one, so in this trade, so good on them. Let's talk about some injuries. Yeah, so three injuries to talk about. One, we're not really sure what it is, but um, Jack Hughes is out week to week. This is a blow to the New Jersey Devils. Out week to week with an upper body injury. He was injured Monday against the Vancouver Canucks, and will be reevaluated as the time goes on. He is third in the NHL with 35 goals this season, so this is a significant blow to the New Jersey Devils. Does it prompt them to make a trade to get some scoring help? Probably, especially if this goes beyond 2 weeks. So, Matt Murray is out for the Leafs. He was injured prior to the All Star game, an ankle injury. They're going to keep an eye on him, and it's been determined that once the Leafs return to the ice, that he will still be out for the foreseeable future. Did not get well over the All Star break. Rasmus Anderson of Calgary, he was riding a scooter in downtown Detroit prior. They're supposed to be playing Detroit tonight, um, and he was hit by a car and was taken to a local hospital. He's considered day to day at this point, but then again, as Keith Olbermann once said, "Aren't we all?" So um, he's day to day. He's going to stay with the team as they're in Detroit. I'm not sure where Calgary goes from here, if they're going to return to Calgary or they're going to go somewhere else, and whether Anderson goes with them. But yeah, so he's been hit by a car, and but he is thankfully in a good way. He wasn't like crushed up or anything like that. So let's talk the trade deadline. So trade deadline preview tonight is going to feature the Central Division. We're going to talk about what their cap space looks like and what are they going to need going into the or from the trade deadline. So for and the way I do it, as I split the teams in each division between buyers, the teams that we think are really going to make the playoffs, or at least have a solid chance at making the playoffs. The tweeners, the teams that are struggling, if they go on a hot streak, they could get into that playoff conversation. And then we're talking about the sellers as well. And this is the first division so far where we've had more than one seller. We're starting to see kind of a split here. And I think when I made this afternoon, it was before the St. Louis trade, and I think you could maybe drop the St. Louis team to the sellers category. But let's take a look at the buyers right now and their cap space. So right now, I've got Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado, and Minnesota in that buyers category. All four teams I think are solid on making the playoffs, and varying cap space for the teams. Dallas um, have they've got about $2 million in cap space, $2.161 million, and they really went up to kind of the cap line at the beginning of the season with the Jason Robertson deal. They're gonna have a little bit of money to play around. They're gonna have to move some money out to bring some uh, moneyed talent in. As far as what they need moving forward, I think they need a second line, at least some offensive talent on the second line. They can't rely on one line, the Jason Robertson line, to keep scoring and keeping them in games. They got some really great defense. Maybe getting a lower pair uh, defensive specialist would help for Dallas. They're in first place in the division. They've got a really good goaltender. They've got um, one of the most phenomenal young talents in the NHL, Jason Robertson. Um, you know, I, they could make some noise in the Western Conference, but they're going to have to hold off Colorado, who's starting to charge. Winnipeg has been solid all season, so they're going to need something like some more secondary scoring in the middle six of that lineup, and then they're going to need a defensive specialist on the back end to make sure that they can keep the puck out of the net, or at least make sure that Jake Ottinger isn't bombarded like he was in Game 7 against Calgary last season, when the Stars were knocked out of the playoffs. Um, let's see, Winnipeg, what do they need? They've got $9.3 million, so it's, acquiring a money player at this point is not a massive concern. They're gonna need some forward depth. They've got some solid lines, but getting some more forward depth, maybe an additional scoring will help. Um, like Dallas, they need a defensive defenseman, somebody that will play some penalty kill minutes, somebody who will keep the puck out of their zone, can move the puck. Um, they've got some good defensemen there. Josh Morrissey's a great defenseman. He was one of the uh, few defensemen at the All Star game, and so just getting a defensive specialist for Winnipeg will be big for them. Colorado, in the same boat as Winnipeg. They've got $9.385 million. Um, that probably will fluctuate as players start coming back into that lineup. Um, so they may not have as much flexibility to move for a player. But if I was Colorado, what I would be looking for is an improvement on that second line. They lost Nazem Kadri in the offseason. Um, the other thing is to get healthy, get and stay healthy heading into the playoffs because they have just been ravaged by injuries this entire season. So, getting and staying healthy for the Colorado Avalanche, getting a middle six forward to or at least a second line center to really solidify those top two lines. The rest will take care of itself for Colorado if they do that, because it's largely the same team. Let's see. In Minnesota, they're in the best position. And Minnesota hasn't always been the case because they've always had the Parise and Suter contracts hanging off in the distance and taking up some cap space. But they're in a pretty good spot right now with $16 million in cap space. And remember, this is prorated, so they can get a pretty high priced player off of this. Um, what I would what I would do is get some help on the second line. You can't just rely on the Kaprizov Zuccarello line to carry the load for the Minnesota Wild and expect them to go far in the playoffs. If you can get a competent second line, a couple players that can play second line minutes, produce, maybe snap Matt Boldy out of the funk that he's been in, who's a phenomenal young player. But if you can snap him out of the funk that he's been in, Minnesota could go far. They can make some noise in that division. They did it last season with knocking off St. Louis and playing really well. So uh, just a few tweaks for Minnesota, but I mean, really just building that second line is what they're going to need. Let's go to the tweeners. Tweeners for the Central Division are Nashville and St. Louis, and I would actually probably bump St. Louis down now to a seller, based off of what they did. The number I have here for St. Louis is pre Tarasenko trade. I haven't looked at Cap Friendly. If you want to know where I'm getting the numbers from, it's from Cap Friendly, which compiles all of the contractual data and gets you good numbers for what's going on in the league. They actually do the prorating so they can tell what the actual cap number is right now. So, um, yeah, Nashville right now has $3.626 million. And that's tough for Nashville because that's not a whole lot. They need scoring help. They haven't been getting the contributions from Matt Duchene. Um, Granlund hasn't been what he was last season. Um, they just need some scoring help. You can't expect, even though he's been doing it to an extent, UC Saros to give you 2-1 wins every night. You got to be able to put the puck in the net and take some of that pressure off of Saros. Um, and the Saros can't play every night. I mean, you can do that, but once you get to the playoffs, you're pretty much burnt. And we saw what happened last year with Saros being injured right before the playoffs and was not able to come in, and uh, Nashville was very efficiently dispatched by Colorado. So, um, yeah, just some help for scoring for Nashville is what they need. They're in a tough spot in that division because you've got Colorado, you got Dallas, you got Minnesota, Winnipeg. They're pretty solid right now. So they'd have to go on a pretty significant hot streak to really get back into that conversation and put some pressure. I don't know that the Pacific is going to be a situation where only three teams are going to make the playoffs. So they can't rely on like last year where Dallas and Nashville waited till the very final day of the season to lock up playoff spots. So let's see. St. Louis, like I said, Vladimir Tarasenko is kind of the first domino for the Blues. There's probably going to be more dominoes to move out of St. Louis. Uh, they've got $3 million, or they had $3 million before the Tarasenko trade. Probably cleared some cap space for them. I'm not sure if they retained any salary from Tarasenko, but yeah. So St. Louis has a little bit more money. What they're going to need to do is determine who is your long term solution there in St. Louis. Are you going to do a full rebuild, or are you going to do just tinkering on there around the edges and hope to compete next season? Um, do you can you move a guy like Jordan Bennington? Like that's a legit question, and will a team want to take a temperamental goalie like him, and his contract, and the fact that he can play lights out for a month and then just take a whole month off? Like there's not enough consistency with Bennington. Of course, Ryan O'Reilly is the big prize, the playoff tested, battle worn veteran that can win big faceoffs, score big goals, and provide leadership. I know Toronto's coveted Ryan O'Reilly. I know there's a few other teams that would probably be in that same position, that that are wanting to make noise in the playoffs and want somebody that's proven. Toronto hasn't had a real good history of bringing in these guys, these leadership guys at the deadline. Foligno a couple of years ago, um, Giordano last season. They didn't work out. So what are they going to do this season? Are they going to bring in O'Reilly? Um, they're going to be making moves, but for St. Louis, it's getting the maximum return, whether it's prospects that'll help retool, or is it going to be picks that will kind of signal a rebuild. Right now, the trade that they got was kind of a mixed bag. They got prospect, they got a player that they're very familiar with, and they got some picks. So kind of best of both worlds. Still leaves their options open. Finally, the sellers in the Central Division. Arizona's got a crap ton of cap space, 34 million. For them, it's just keep stacking picks and prospects. Um, Next year is the year I expect them to start turning the ship. Um, that they're going to try and compete next season. Uh, it's going to be a slow process. It'll probably be kind of like what Buffalo did last year, which is start out slow, get momentum as the season goes along, and then towards the end of the season we can reevaluate and see where what that franchise is looking at, what needs they have moving forward. Are that how far along are they in their rebuild? Um, but it's going to be a couple seasons before they can get into the playoffs, which is right around the time that uh, uh, what's his face Austin Matthews becomes a free agent. So that's always been the rumors. Austin Matthews returns to Arizona to rebuild the franchise. That's also right around the time that they start. They should be moving into their new facility. I think it's 3 years. So, um, you know, new arena, rebuilt team. Can they keep the momentum going? Although you know what, I'm not mad about this whole mullet arena situation. I really like the intimate atmosphere there. Finally, Chicago. 13 million. It's not bad, but for a team that really just committed seppuku in the offseason, they need to do something. They need to get an answer out of Taves and Kane, and really convince them to move. Because if Taves and Kane just say, "No, we're going to stay the rest of the season," this whole thing that they did in the offseason was a complete waste. Um, and I think that was part of the calculus of what they did in the offseason by just tearing it down and not really getting a whole lot of value for what they sent off, was to convince Taves and Kane to go into the market and get traded at the deadline to move on to new teams. Again, if they don't, if they can get Kane to do it, I think that's going to be a big thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Taves stays, but if Kane can go, they're going to get some value. They're going to get a lot of value out of Patrick Kane, and kind of speed along that rebuild. This is very clearly a rebuild for the Chicago Blackhawks. They're going to have to get picks, young prospects, in exchange for whatever they're trading. They're also talking about trading guys like Jake McCabe, and some of the other defensive help. I don't think they're going to move Seth Jones yet, um, but they could. Um, but yeah, Chicago really, they really kind of poisoned the well this off season, and it was not really done well. I mean, they could have done all those trades that we talked about at the trade deadline, trade off all those players, but get some really good value back for them, and they didn't do that. Because that would have even told the Tays and Kane that this season's going to be tough. If you move out, we're going to get you to a good place where you want to go. So, and then, who does Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves tell the Blackhawks that they want to be traded to? They've got a full no movement clause. So they can give, 1, 2, 10 teams they want to be traded to. But they really control their destiny of where they go. Do they want to go to Toronto? They want to go to New York? Do they want to go to, Tampa, Colorado? Who knows? So, but hopefully the Chicago Blackhawks get that answer. If not, it's going to be a very long rebuild for Chicago. So, let's talk about the Sabres beat. Uh, of course, I love my Sabres. They're going to come out of the All Star break on Saturday against. I can't remember who they're playing on Saturday, but the big thing is how are they going to come out of that break? There's been over the last few years where Buffalo has had a break for whatever reason, whether it was, a league mandated break or COVID or something along those lines, and they didn't come out very well. They would lose a few right off the hop. Right now, they're in such a position in the Eastern Conference and a hyper competitive and getting more so with the trades that are being made. That they can't stumble getting out of the gate, off of the All-Star break. The other question you have to ask is how healthy is Tage Thompson? He didn't look good, and back injuries are notoriously tough on athletes. Was he able to get good rest and good recoup, while he was on the All-Star break? He didn't participate even though he was selected the All-Star team, um, but did he get enough time to heal hopefully it was a muscle injury rather than a, structural back injury like spine or anything like that. Of course, Buffalo Sabres fans are very familiar with spine injuries and the damage that they can do. So, um, yeah, how do they come out of the break? And that will go a long ways to say how are we gonna how are we gonna do it towards the end of the season? Are we gonna kind of play out the string and finish ninth in the Eastern Conference like we did last season, or at least fifth in the Eastern the Atlantic Division? Are we going to make that playoff push and get even closer, get closer to 90 points on the season? That would be great. That would be a even if you don't make the playoffs, if you can get to 90 points, that's telling people that you're again you're improving. That's a massive improvement over last season where they had like 76 points. So It's rubber to the meets the road right now for the Sabres. I'm very happy to see Dylan Cousins extended. Getting these things done early, especially with all the cap space that the Sabres have. If you're not going to acquire players, at least make sure that the players that are going to be part of the long term solution for Buffalo are taken care of. Like I said, if you start taking care of these players, then the word's going to get along around the league that Buffalo is a place that values its players, creates a great culture to play in, and then you'll start seeing free agents look at coming to Buffalo. So, um, and who knows? Maybe it's Patrick Kane next in the off season. We don't know, but that's it for this week. I really appreciate everyone watching us on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitter. We have Facebook right now. We got Twitch. We got all the folks on saying hi to my folks on TikTok. I really appreciate you all watching us. Give us a like, a share, subscribe, whatever you're doing, whatever platform you're watching us on. If you're watching this after the show is done being live on any of these platforms, we really appreciate any support you can give us. It just helps get more this in front of more people. And anyway, we'll talk to everyone next week as we get closer to the trade deadline. Maybe have a few more deals to talk about, and we get to feature our final conference preview before that trade deadline, which is the Pacific Division, and we'll talk about that then. Anyway, have a great night, and we'll talk to you all later.